My criticism of the media here centers around the fact that they continue to be utterly obsessed with Donald Trump while giving the people here who have real power and real influence a free pass. So this was painfully clear to me this morning when I went to the front page of seattletimes.com. And Nicole had put in a link to a story. So what we do every morning before the show is, Nicole will put in some things of interest and I'll put in some things of interest and we'll go through and we'll ultimately build the show, right? What's tickling our fancy on any given day. And so it includes looking at what other media outlets are doing. And so this started just because I was following a link to the Seattle Times that Nicole had put in there and the front page popped up. And the first thing, of course, that hit me is their dramatic picture of Attorney General Nick Brown with his hands crossed, saying, headline, How AG Nick Brown Decides When to Sue a Lawless President. Brown says it comes down to a three-pronged test as he tries to shut down President Trump's executive orders aimed at dismantling federal agencies, slashing spending, and redefining what it means to be a citizen. Now, I saw that, but it wasn't like, oh my God, here the Seattle Times goes again. I think this is pretty par for the course for the Seattle Times, is to do some glowing expose on whatever politician it is that's going after Donald Trump. So I saw that, but then I started to look at the stories around it. So this was the front page as it existed this morning when I looked at it, maybe around 9 a.m. So the AG Nick Brown story is bad, but then I started to look at the other stories next to it. And one thing stood out immediately was just how many stories on the front page of a local newspaper were negative stories about Donald Trump. So if you're watching the visual show, just to give you a good visualization, I put red boxes around all of them. And they're all negative, right? So you've got one that even looked like on its face it could be a story about something going wrong in Washington state under Democrats. The headline was, What's WA's top problem? Survey shows a new issue has emerged. And I thought, well, let me click on that. It was tariffs. That was the one story on there that could have been about something Washington state Democrats are doing wrong was actually about tariffs and what Donald Trump is doing wrong. And then it goes into Trump on immigration, Kristi Noem getting protested in South Dakota, more on Trump tariffs, Trump's beef with Mexico, Seattle-based law firm wins battle against Trump's retribution order, some hit piece on Elon Musk, and then even going after Donald Trump for not protecting endangered species. And of course, at the center of the front page, this Nick Brown story about he's such a hero, for going after Donald Trump. And so, of course, that strikes me, right? Because it's the Seattle Times. It's not the Washington Post. It's not the New York Times. It's not the Wall Street Journal. It's the Seattle Times. So call me crazy, but I guess I would assume somewhere on the front page there would be one story, any story, that sought to fulfill the core obligation of their job, which is to hold powerful people accountable. And if they're the Seattle Times and they're covering Washington state, wouldn't there be at least one story that would be holding Democrats here accountable for anything? Now, there was one I saw, the headline on there, WA hits the brakes on worst speeders, how lawmakers' actions will affect our roads. But it wasn't a piece being critical of Democrats. It was essentially a piece celebrating Democrats for what they're doing to make our roads safer, despite the fact that, this same newspaper gave them a free pass when they took away the ability of police to pursue violent criminals and made our roadways more dangerous than ever before. So the entire front page, as you saw it, if you logged on in Seattle or anywhere in Washington state and you looked at it, and we wonder why Donald Trump loses here so badly. And we wonder why people continue to put into office Democrats who are making our state worse. It's because for a passive news consumer, if they go to consume news in what is still the most prominent news outlet in the state, this is what they see. They see a celebration, heroism of an elected leader in our state, not criticism of what he's doing, but holding him up as this beacon of hope of the fight against the Trump administration. Then everything from tariffs to endangered species and immigration, Trump is just bad, bad, bad. So that again reinforces the press is the most powerful entity on earth. If the Seattle Times or really any other legacy media outlet wanted to do its job, this would be reversed. Would it not? Would it not be reversed? Would there not be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stories on the front that was looking into holding powerful people here accountable, and maybe a couple looking at Donald Trump and sure, the ways that Donald Trump's policies are affecting Washington state? It would be the opposite. There is no shortage of news outlets in the United States holding Donald Trump accountable for what he's doing. As they should. I don't care. I don't want Donald Trump to be coddled. If I've ever given the impression that Donald Trump needs to be coddled, forgive me. Now, in case you think, well, Brandi probably just did some creative cropping on this, what else was on the front page? Okay, let's expand it, right? If you had kept scrolling down the front page of SeattleTimes.com, it would have been more of the same. More stories. In fact, there's first subsection on the Trump administration. 4 hit pieces on Donald Trump. Right in a row. And then you go down. Trump says he's going to reopen Alcatraz prison. Doing so would be difficult and costly. What the hell does that have to do with Seattle politics or Washington state politics? It's a prison in California. In battle against transgender rights, Trump targets HUD's housing policies. A small Montana town has thrived on federal jobs. Now comes Trump's cuts. Trump, in a new interview, says he doesn't know if he backs due process rights. And then elevates some fighters against Donald Trump. Pritzker and Ocasio-Cortez, a billionaire and a former bartender, emerge as Trump resistance leaders. A couple op-eds. I stood up to RFK Jr. until security booted me. Here's why. Trump is about to steal my friend's Christmas and yours. So as I expanded to the whole front page, and yes, I blacked out what ads the Seattle Times was showing me. I don't need you to know what I'm shopping for in my free time. Not that it was anything bad. So on that whole front page, I found 3 stories. There's a blue box around each of them that had some sort of tie to Washington state Democrats and their policies and their politics. But they weren't hit pieces. I mentioned the first one on roadways. And then there's Washington lawmakers, okay, more funding for $1 million a day salmon recovery program. And there's one that says the Northwest power grid can't keep up with demand. We must act. And I dove into that one and thought, well, maybe that's about how elected leaders here have leaned into this absolute grift of climate policy. And now we're screwed over for it. No, they mentioned Trump multiple times in it. There were 2 stories highlighted here in yellow that were critical of Democrats on the entire front page of SeattleTimes.com this morning. 2. One of them had nothing to do with Washington state Democrats. One of them, headline, Biden aides decided against a cognitive test in early 2024, book says. Probably a piece they got from a wire service or something. So on the entire front page of the Seattle Times, the still most important and most read news entity in the entire state of Washington, there is one story critical of Washington state Democrats, and it's an opinion piece. It's an op-ed. It says, Washington's just passed budget has some troubling and costly bugs. Great. The entire page of SeattleTimes.com, you scroll to the very bottom and you look at the bottom right underneath the ads, and you would have spotted this one opinion piece, the one thing on the entire page after a legislative session where they just pushed through an insane amount of crazy policies, including an illegal reparations law. Bob Ferguson's about to sign rent control. He's about to sign pay for striking workers as a gift to the unions. $9.5 billion in new taxes, an 8% increase in spending, and the newspaper of record has one story, an opinion piece on the entire front page talking about any of it. And you wonder why we're here. You wonder why we're doing so well. There's a reason a show like ours can exist, and why it's the only, we don't even have to have another job. This is what we get to do full time. It's because enough people have noticed what I just pointed out about the legacy media and about how they pretend to be one thing while doing something completely different, and that is being a mouthpiece for the very people who they're supposed to be holding accountable. And that's all they are. And what I'd say about that, one entire piece, whole front page, opinion piece from Kate Riley in the opinion section. That same editorial board member was part of the board that endorsed all of the politicians who were in charge of the budget they're now criticizing. So they keep helping put these people back in office, and then they'll throw in an occasional piece being critical of them so they can say they're fair and balanced. Now, if the Seattle Times wants to come out and just say, hey, we're going to go the way of the stranger, and we're going to be a cheerleading team for the party in power, and we're just going to be an anti-Trump publication, fine. Do what you want to do. I don't care. But you can't continue to hold yourself up as the newspaper of record where you still say, under the banner of the Seattle Times, let's see if it's there today. Hold on, because this just cracks me up. If I could type. They always say in the edition of the paper when you get it. Do you know what it says? Winner of Pulitzer Prizes, right? They're so proud of that. When you click on it, take a look. How many Pulitzer Prizes do the Seattle Times have right now? Winner of 11 Pulitzer Prizes, independent and locally owned for more than 128 years. Good for you. Good for you. Did no one at the Seattle Times look at the front page of seattletimes.com and ask themselves, are we doing our duty to the public? Are we doing our duty to the people we serve? Are we doing justice to the First Amendment, to the Fourth Estate, to the free press, and to the fact that our founding fathers knew it was so important for us to stand in the breach against politicians and people in power? I guarantee if you showed that front page to every single employee of the Seattle Times who works in the news division, they would say yes, that they're doing their duty because they're holding Orange Man bad accountable. And they wouldn't see any problem in the world with continuing to let off the hook the people who are in charge of our state's downfall. And that is exactly what's wrong. Any problem you have, any gripe you have with politics in the state of Washington, with politics in the United States, is at its core the fault of the media. Truly. If you're mad about Donald Trump being in office, you don't like Donald Trump, why do you think Donald Trump was elected in the first place? I've already said I don't think Donald Trump's, when he came down the escalator at that time, his campaign shouldn't have had a chance in the world. Now, I've since voted for him. But at the time, the reason why Donald Trump's campaign took off is the media ate it up. Wall to wall. Everything dumb he said and did. Oh, it's on the news. Great ratings. This is perfect. For the first time ever, we're going to take all these campaign speeches unfettered. No commercials. And they turned around and like, oh my God, he got elected. Yeah, because you gave him billions of dollars worth of free advertising for a year and a half straight.